Today, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to dive into a set of stories that millions upon millions of students have to learn every single year. But you know what? These are so much more than just stories. They're actually foundational lessons in courage, in faith, and in what it really means to grow up. It's a really interesting question when you stop to think about it, right? The tales we were told when we're young, they often become the very bedrock of our values. In a way, they're the first tools we're given to help us face the world.
And that's exactly what we're going to do. We are cracking open the English textbook for, get this, 150 million 10th graders across India. We're going to see the exact lessons that are shaping an entire generation. So let's jump right into the first one.
Okay, so our first big theme is something we can all relate to, courage. But how do you actually teach something like that? Well, this curriculum has a really clever way of doing it. It takes two stories that seem worlds apart and shows how they're teaching the exact same powerful lesson.
So on one side, you have a story about a little seagull who is just terrified to take his first flight. His big enemy? It's the fear inside his own head. And on the other side, you've got Nelson Mandela, fighting a massive system of racial oppression, a fight that landed him in jail for 27 years. One battle is incredibly personal and internal, the other is historic and external. But at their core, both of these stories teach one crucial thing: how you conquer fear.
Let's look at the seagull's journey. It's really dramatic. First, he's just stuck on this ledge, totally paralyzed by fear while his family is basically making fun of him. Then, absolute starvation kicks in. He sees his mother with a fish, and that's the temptation. He's so maddened by hunger that he just leaps. He dives straight into the empty air. And in that moment, something incredible happens. Instinct just takes over, his wings open up, and suddenly, he's flying. He soars.
And this is where it all clicks together so beautifully. See, the seagull didn't just magically stop being afraid. No, he was pushed past his fear by a much stronger instinct, hunger. And this idea perfectly mirrors Nelson Mandela's own words from his autobiography, which is also in this textbook. He says, "Courage isn't about the absence of fear, it's about the triumph over it." I mean, what a profound lesson for a 15-year-old to learn.
So let's move on to our next big theme. This one builds on courage and takes us into an even more abstract idea, faith. And this next story is just this beautiful and kind of funny parable.
It all starts with a farmer, a guy named Lencho. He's a simple, hardworking man. But one day, out of nowhere, this brutal hailstorm just completely annihilates his cornfield. Everything, gone in a flash. He's facing absolute ruin.
So what do you do in a situation like that? I mean, seriously, what does a person do when they've lost everything and there's absolutely no one on earth who can help? Where do you even turn?
Well, Lencho does something pretty extraordinary. He sits down and he writes a letter. Not to a friend, not to a bank. He writes it directly to God. To him, this makes perfect sense. His faith is just that pure, that absolute. And he's not messing around with vague requests either. He gets very specific and practical. He asks God for exactly 100 pesos. That's what he needs to plant his fields again and keep his family fed until the next harvest.
Now, you can imagine what happens when this letter shows up at the local post office. At first, the postmaster finds it hilarious. But then, he's just deeply moved. He's amazed by the strength of this man's faith, and he decides, I cannot let this faith be broken. So he starts a collection right there with his employees.
But here's where reality hits. As kind as they are, despite their best efforts, they only manage to scrape together 70 pesos. It's a really generous act for sure, but it's not the full 100 that Lencho asked for. And this is the twist in the story. When Lencho gets the envelope with the money, is he surprised that God answered? Nope, not at all. Of course God answered. But when he counts the cash and sees it's only 70 pesos, he becomes absolutely enraged.
Because in his mind, it's impossible that God would make a mistake or send him less than he asked for. So he immediately writes a second letter. He tells God, hey, thanks for the money, but next time, please don't send it through the mail, because those post office employees are a bunch of crooks, and they must have stolen the other 30 pesos. It is just a brilliant, brilliant lesson in faith, irony, and human nature.
Okay, so we've covered courage and faith. Now let's zoom in on something a little more intimate: identity and the power of tradition. For this, we get a little glimpse of life in the coastal state of Goa.
So this story is all about a central figure in Goan village life, the baker, known by the traditional name, the pater. Now, these aren't just guys who make bread. No, they are walking, talking links to the region's Portuguese history.
They're part of the very fabric of the community.
And the way the story describes them is just so vivid. You can practically hear the chang-chang of the baker's bamboo staff as he arrives in the morning. You can just picture the kids running out to get sweetbread bangles, while the grown-ups get their daily loaves. Being a baker was such a good gig that anyone who looked well-fed, with a jackfruit-like appearance, was said to look like a patter.
So what's the big lesson here? It's that an everyday object, something as simple as a loaf of bread, can be tied to something so much bigger than itself. In Goa, bread is part of every important occasion, marriages, festivals, you name it. It's not just food, it is a symbol of culture and identity.
So, as we take a step back, you can really start to see how these stories, which seem so different on the surface, all come together. They're building this incredible curriculum of character, piece by piece.
They teach the kind of courage you need to face your deepest fears, whether that's on a cliffside ledge or in a prison cell. They make you think about absolute faith, and also about the funny, complicated reality of human kindness. And they show how our identity is baked right into the simplest traditions of where we come from. And that, right there, is the real power of this kind of literature. For 150 million students, these aren't just chapters you memorize for an exam. They're some of the very first structured lessons they get on how to navigate the challenges and the joys of just being human.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Whether it was from a school textbook, a story your grandma told you, or a movie you saw as a kid, what are the stories that really stuck with you, and what lessons did they end up teaching you?